The Big Ten, as its name suggests, is a big conference with some big stadiums. You just have to ignore the numerical aspect of that name because it's a straight up lie. Anyway, let's try to rank the stadiums. Ross-Ade Stadium. Just because I've put it last doesn't mean I think it's bad. I mean, with a name like the Purdue Boilermakers, you won't have to worry about washing your hands with cold water for starters. The simple and clean horseshoe design is perfectly fine. What little frontage there is looks great, as does the black and gold seating. There's a sizable video board with a large party deck underneath. I just think it's a little too basic to put it above any of the others for now. It is, however, set to undergo some major redevelopments at the end of the season, so that's good. SECU Stadium. This is very similar to Ross-Ade, but what puts it ahead of it is rather than just a simple horseshoe layout, they've added some impressive steep multi-tiered premium seating, as well as a couple of very steep upper decks over on the north, from which you get a great view of the campus. Those added features make the stadium a little more to my liking. And as unimportant as it is, I do quite like the Maryland flag inspired end zones. For the most part, Ryan Field is to stadiums as Ryanair is to airlines. It serves a worthy purpose, but the amenities are a little bit rough around the edges. However, the best aspect of this stadium goes against all the principles of Ryanair, and that is the grand castle-like facade of the Western Stand. Pretty cool. There are some more oddities on the inside. This section, which is just confusing, but also this unique arching upper deck, which I quite like. As I mentioned earlier, it's not in the best condition, but this too is expected to be renovated in the near future. Spartan Stadium. On the surface, this stadium doesn't look all that interesting. The exterior is pretty dull on all but the more built up western side, and it's not that much better on the inside. What does it have going for it? Oh yes, it's the only stadium in the conference that's named after the team's nickname, so that's not anything actually. Oh, it has a natural grass field, I like that. But yeah, it's a decent stadium, I'm sure it does the job, however, there's just not that much jumping out at me that sets this stadium apart. SHI Stadium. In some ways it's similar to Spartan Stadium, mainly the symmetrical design with the similar ruler-shaped upper decks on either side. But I think it has a slight edge over it. Yes, it's smaller, and yes, there's less video board coverage, but it's a little more aesthetically pleasing for starters, and more importantly, the best feature by far that this stadium has to offer is its cannon. A lot of people say it's outdated technology, and yes, it's not going to be taking down tanks anytime soon, but it has absolutely no trouble taking down a streaker, which is great entertainment. Memorial Stadium. Despite not being the oldest stadium in the conference, this probably has the most old-fashioned look to it. It shares some similarities with Franklin Field, college football's oldest stadium. Firstly, the shape of the seating layout, but also the grand exterior, albeit quite different from Franklin Field. It contains hundreds of limestone columns. It looks incredible. But the stadium does also have some less desirable aspects of an old school design. It really doesn't maximize crowd noise, so the stadium doesn't get much praise for its atmosphere. Kinnick Stadium is comfortably middle of the road as far as the Big Ten goes. Interestingly, it's the only stadium in the conference that has a completely separate stand on each side, all of which have a proper brick exterior. So yeah, it's a solid venue overall. But one downside is that there is a children's hospital next door, and the children like to wave at the spectators in the stadium, and you are expected to wave back, so that's a bit of a hassle if you're just trying to eat your hot dog in peace. I am of course joking, that's a very endearing tradition. Memorial Stadium. A lot of people may have expected this to take the number one spot. The number 1 ranked Memorial Stadium, that is. But no, there's still one to come. Other than its grandiose facades and its distinctive end zone seating, it's famous for the fact that once full, the stadium more or less becomes one of Nebraska's largest cities. It goes Omaha first, Lincoln itself second, this stadium third, and then it falls off a cliff. The next largest city is Gatlin, famous for its appearance in Stephen King's Children of the Corn. Man, they really do love their corn in Nebraska. Camp Randall Stadium. Now this is the oldest stadium in the conference, and normally I try not to consider history too much when ranking, but I'm a bit of a history buff, and the fact that this place was built as a venue for the game between the Union and the Confederacy to decide the outcome of the Civil War is just remarkable, almost unbelievable. But it must be true, I read it on the Wisconsin Badgers verified Twitter account. Anyway, what I like about this stadium most of all is that it seems to be very cozy. Okay, perhaps that's not the best word for it, but you know what I mean. Beaver Stadium. There always seems to be at least one stadium's placing that I know is going to be controversial. I feel like this is one of them. It's a stadium that gets a lot of praise for its traditions and atmosphere, which many would consider the best in the conference. As for the stadium itself, however, it's kinda like LSU's Tiger Stadium. The extensions that have been added over the years don't exactly blend in seamlessly, so it's not exactly pretty. I do like though how it's called Beaver Stadium, and they've put a giant beaver on the side of it. A particularly athletic and predatorial looking beaver. Memorial Stadium. From afar, this stadium might seem plain and simple, but when you take a closer look, there are some very impressive features. To the north of the stadium, we have this Hall of Champions, which is absolutely spectacular. If the entire exterior looked like that, well, they'd be broke, but it would be up there with the best exteriors of any stadium in the world. The interior is simple by comparison, but the huge single-tiered western stand, which was once the one and only stand at the stadium, is quite impressive. Yeah, I think I like this stadium more than most people probably do. It mightn't necessarily look it, but Michigan Stadium is the biggest stadium in the country, for which it gets the nickname of the Large House. Hang on, was it? Yeah, the Large House. I was second guessing myself there for a second. Its simple and clean design, consisting of an uninterrupted single-tiered sunken bowl, mightn't be exciting, but it's certainly elegant and makes for an incredible atmosphere. The facilities are great and are in very good condition, so you might be wondering why it's not number 1. Well, like I alluded to earlier, it's just not the most interesting design. Perhaps they could have added some dragons or something. Huntington Bank Stadium is the newest venue in the conference, although the average onlooker may not necessarily be able to tell, because they've done a great job incorporating the old school college football stadium aesthetic, in particular its wraparound brick exterior. Unlike most older college stadiums though, there are a heap of chairback seats done up in the Golden Gophers colours. To cap it off, they've left the western end zone mostly empty, and moved the video board to the side, allowing for a great downtown view. There's not much more you could ask for. Ohio Stadium. Unlike Michigan Stadium, it has one of the most imposing exteriors going round, including the Pantheon, which is perhaps even more majestic than the Hall of Champions in Indiana. There's no let-up on the inside with its intimidating double-decker horseshoe seating layout, which is the most famous of all horseshoes. And yes, despite the southern end zone seating, it's still technically a horseshoe, because that isn't connected to the rest of the stadium. At least that's what they say. It is one of my favorite stadiums in the country, but if I had to try and point out a flaw in this stadium, there's one. That's a flaw. So there you have it, the Big Ten stadiums ranked from 14 to 1. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, have a good one.